Welcome back to Supremely Black Podcast. This is your host, D Rose. Now, this story, we're going to be covering some of the history behind Juneteenth, and I'm going to introduce you to Opal Lee. This is a lady that is from Fort Worth, Texas, that in 2016, at the age of 89, she started her march to Washington, D.C. from Fort Worth. Her goal was to cover 2.5 miles per day to make it to Washington, D.C. And I'm going to show you a video that's going to uncap her whole story, but I want to give a personal shout out to Opal Lee for making something like this part of her lifestyle, right? This is something that she has forever going to be considered as a grandmother of Juneteenth, right? You couldn't thank people like that enough for taking the initiative to put something in front of everyone and make it a national holiday. Now, I've heard people say, now that it's a national holiday, it doesn't feel as genuine. I was one of the people that actually grew up in a small town that had annual Juneteenth celebrations. Now, as things have went on and life has happened, it's not as consistent as it used to be, but I remember it being, cookouts. I remember it being a parade. They had pageants, everything to kind of celebrate being black. Now, for me, no issue at all with them making it a national holiday, because even though our people did not fight for a holiday, they fought for freedom. This still speaks a lot to Opal Lee, especially for someone to start a walk at 89 years old to do that. And the reason why she chose 2.5 years is because if you don't know that the slaves that were enslaved in Texas had no idea that black people were free until the announcement was officially made on Juneteenth in Galveston, Texas. So that's some of the history behind it. But I want you to watch this video. Let me know what you think. I just want to say thank you to everybody that was a trailblazer that has taken the initiative to put us ahead. And it's not necessarily asking for anything, it's to put the action behind it to see that those changes happen during your lifetime. Salute.
These walls in Fort Worth, Texas may look like a Black History museum, but it's actually the home of Opal Lee.
And Miss Opal Lee, you are 97 years old, right? Many consider you the grandmother of Juneteenth. How does that title sit with you?
Hey, I don't mind titles.
For years, Lee advocated for Juneteenth to become a federal holiday, inspired by her own family celebrations.
We'd go to the fairground for the Juneteenth celebration. There'd be music and food.
But one year, when Lee was 12, the annual celebration turned to terror.
My parents had just bought a house and my mom had it fixed up so nice. But people started gathering.
What kind of people?
All kinds.
It was a white mob.
The paper says it was 500 of them. And my dad came home with a gun and the police were there and told my dad, if you bust a cap, we'll let this mob have you. They did despicable things.
The terror did not quelch her resolve. In 2016, Lee made headlines at 89 years old, pledging to walk from Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. The journey, 2.5 miles each day, to symbolize the 2.5 years Black Texans waited for the message of emancipation to reach them.
That if a little old lady in tennis shoes was walking from Fort Worth to D.C. 1,400 miles, somebody would take notice.
And they did. In 2021, the White House calling Lee, President Joe Biden making Juneteenth a federal holiday.
How did you feel?
No, I don't know how to express it. I was awed. I was thankful.
In May, Lee was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
I'm struck by how much history lives on your walls, but also in your stories. What do you ultimately want your legacy to be?
That there was an old lady who tried to get it over to everybody that we are one people.
And Opal Lee mentioned that when she was a little girl, her house was burned down on Juneteenth. Well, this year, Habitat for Humanity is building Lee a home on the same plot of land where her family's home was decimated. Now, let's dig into Juneteenth further with Pulitzer Prize winner Annette Gordon-Reed. She's a historian and law professor at Harvard and the author of the New York Times bestseller on Juneteenth. Annette, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
So as we touched on it, Juneteenth is a time to commemorate emancipation and freedom, but it was not always met with celebration. In fact, there was some intense fear. You specifically wrote former slaves had to be wary of open celebration.
Absolutely. The people who had enslaved them were upset about losing their property interests. They represented money to them, and so it was a loss to them. And so there were instances where people were actually whipped for celebrating, and even much worse than that.
Wow. And I mean, it's not lost on me, and I'll confess, I'm the daughter of immigrants. I'm a product of public schools. I didn't know much about Juneteenth until recently, until it really hit the national consciousness. For those wondering, how should I engage with the day, whether black or otherwise, what do you say?
It's a community day. It's a day for celebration, somewhat akin to July 4th. It's a time for members of the family to come together. I've always wanted, and I think it's a good thing for people to take family histories, to talk about their family situation. So it's a day for togetherness and to commemorate something that important that happened.
And we saw earlier that ceremony where Opal Lee got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. You said you were there.
Yes, I was.
And it's not lost on me that many people are alive who experienced some of what we talk about in the history books.
Yes, absolutely.
Even your family is from Texas.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my ancestors were brought over from the deep South into Texas as enslaved people. We lived through Jim Crow. I integrated the schools of my hometown. So this is all very, very recent history.
And it's recent history that's also a contentious history, especially right now. What's your overall message as the country grapples with its complicated history?
Well, you have to face the truth. I mean, you can't run from things that actually happen. It tells us who we are, where we are today, and where we want to go. So I would say don't listen to those voices who tell you that you're not supposed to listen to the past. Look at the past.
So as I was saying, dope story. And again, I think just the importance of it, regardless if you consider yourself that somebody that was indigenous, native to this land, however, there's somebody that looks like you that has been through some of the trials and tribulations of trying to get your history represented. And I think this is a great way for people to give acknowledgement, because even though I knew some things about Opal Lee, I didn't know the extent of why they considered her the grandmother of Juneteenth. And there was other trailblazers along the way, but for her to get it to a point to where it's a national holiday kills anything about of what it may have meant from a political standpoint. None of that actually really matters to me. It's just the point that she took it upon herself to walk those 2.5 miles to get to Washington, D.C., knowing that it would garner enough attention for somebody to take it seriously and make it a national holiday. So I seriously can't thank her enough and anyone else. But that just goes to show you the true importance of knowing, one, your history, and if you don't consider it your history, right, it's still someone that comes from a bloodline that knows of how their people were impacted. This is a direct story that shows you of her dad and her mother, what they went through, from their house being burned down, from the police telling me if they did anything that they would pretty much get killed. And to see and know that someone's living that had that fight to get things like that overturned or get things like that represented, you have to salute that, because along the lines of, we may see freedom now completely different. And I hear people always say, like, we're not our ancestors. But to be completely honest with you, there are things that occur now, it's not the same. So if you ask me, I don't even know if things got into that type of, if we had that type of energy going on now, how would we respond? We've seen these people make it through those times. In 97, that's not, you don't wake up with that. You know, I have stories from talking to my grandmother, which is, I think, 76 or 77, and some of her elders that she grew up around that were older and could tell you those stories. You know, I had an auntie that lived to be 100. A close family, a member of ours, I think Mr. Clarence, lived to be like 102 or 3. They have several stories that you could hear like this, and we kind of see it from our own lens of the things that we're facing. Yes, as more things change and more things stay the same, but I would argue to say that we did not see the same systematic oppression as our elders did. So I salute them for making it through those times to get and keep us in this space to where we're able to dictate of what we want to do and can make our own impact on the world and not focus on what we're being restricted from. And I think this is just a telltale sign that it never stops. She made her last push that is noticed at 89 years old. As of 2024, me making this video on June 20th, it's a national holiday. Salute again to Miss Opal Lee. Thank you for everything that you did. Salute.